Can sim racing ever be realistic? People spend thousands and thousands of hours arguing about which racing simulator is realistic. And usually that's exactly what it is. They're arguing. It's not a discussion when the people having the discussion have absolutely zero interest in what the other people have to say. Now, we're not going to lower ourselves to that level, because anyone who watches this video is clearly an impartial, upstanding member of the sim racing community. Anyone who is engaged in this kind of behavior can leave now.
That's right. Off you
We're just going to see if we can encourage people to feedback something more constructive than "this simulator sucks, I've driven GT3 cars and they don't brake like this." And maybe something more like this.
Good day! The current driving experience your product provides is not really scratching the itch one desires. It's possible that you've done a cracking job on simulating the tyre and vehicle dynamics, but my basic peasant spec simulator is unable to translate this into an engaging driving experience. Any questions, please reach out to my secretary. Tally-ho!
Now, before we get too deep into this subject, I think it's really important to acknowledge and be aware of some key considerations. The first one being financial limitations. So sim racing titles such as iRacing, Assetto Corsa, Le Mans Ultimate, rFactor, they're all commercial softwares designed to run on consumer level hardware in order to create revenue, to make money, basically. So obviously there's going to be employees at these developers who are passionate about the sport and genuinely care about the experience of the title. But unfortunately, these things really trump the requirement for the business to be profitable and sustainable. Number two is the physical limitations of the hardware. So the software needs to run on thousands of different configurations: CPUs, GPUs, operating systems, memory configs. There's so many that exist at all different levels of performance over so many years, something like 10 years. The third one is compute power. So our tiny desktop CPUs are relatively basic in terms of compute power. For example, a complex tire model simulation, an industry tire model simulation, requires a cluster of systems. Number four is the objective of the software. Is it a driving simulator or is it a racing simulator? Is it a vehicle simulator or a weather simulator for that matter? Because no software, no individual software will exactly simulate all of these, and that's just the nature of the beast. We have to accept that any commercial racing simulator, which is realistically what we're talking about today, is not going to exactly simulate every single aspect of vehicle physics, tire physics, and the environment, as well as simulating, the whole race weekend format. And also, we might not like to acknowledge it, but we're really picky when it comes to simplified user interface. We expect it to look good, have zero bugs, have every single option under the sun, all controllers supported, and then have this seamless online multiplayer experience. We don't ask for much, do we? And I can tell you that even multi-million-pound simulators do not have a friendly interface, ironically, because the budget doesn't stretch that far. The reality is 99.99% of users can only utilize three main channels of feedback on their rigs: visual, auditory, and tactile. So sight, sound, and the feedback we get from the wheel that we touch. That's three, but the human body actually has an additional five kind of channels of feedback. And again, using basic terms, that's smell, taste, balance, body position, and internal awareness. Now, the last three of those are interesting because it's a combination of these three that make up the seat of the pants feeling you get in the real world. And it's really well documented that that area is the hardest feedback to simulate in like a static environment, or even a more advanced simulator that has some room to move. It's still a relatively small environment. So without these channels of feedback, we never really experience realism. So It's the developer's job to fill in these gaps using clever tricks or whatever with the 3 channels that we do have at our disposal. Let's say, for example, a developer focuses on car and tire physics, and they create like the most accurate to the real world simulation of the car and the tire physics. But then to the end user, the sim racer, it feels shit. What's the problem? Is it that the physics and the tire model are inaccurate? Or is it because with the limited channels of feedback, it feels inaccurate? Maybe on a simulator which can offer more of those channels, the bad physics would actually feel good. Who knows? I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you're in the comments now, furiously typing away. But as far as I know, nobody really has the resources to spend millions on a simulator to play racing games. Or do they? You know, if you do have these a multi-million-pound simulator just to play racing games, please let me know. I would very much like to be your friend. A little side comment here. So even the very best simulators still have a really difficult time finding correlation with the real world. And I have witnessed this firsthand. And I'm not talking about some full motion sim rig in a rich guy's garage. You know, I'm talking industry investment above 3 million quid, let's say, on a system that was modern, let's say in 2023, 2024. So not old technology, this is fairly new technology. And I say this so you've got some kind of level of trust that what I'm saying is actually relevant and not just some guy making it up as he goes along. So I do have some real world first-hand experience of this correlation. Now, to further throw some doubt into the what is realistic question. Just because something does not feel good to a driver of a sim racing title does not mean it's not realistic. I want you to bear the following in mind just for a few minutes. So when you change tires to another size, brand, compound or construction on a vehicle, the whole vehicle can feel completely different, especially when you're like on the limit, on the capacity of those tires. Why is this relevant? Well, even if the developer models and simulates a tire perfectly, unless they happen to have simulated the tire, which works perfectly in real life, then the chances are it won't feel great in the sim. So it's hard enough for developing tires in the real world, so simulating it is bound to be difficult, especially on the budgets of some of these titles. You're probably asking yourself now, what are you talking about? Are you just saying that we should just accept it and shut up and not really give any feedback to these developers? Of course not. Good developers will find the balance between a rewarding driving experience with limited feedback and realistic physics. I think the important thing to realize and acknowledge that the two things are not necessarily the same thing. So if you perfectly simulate real life, it won't necessarily feel rewarding to drive on your fairly basic home simulator. Let's be clear here. Should we take it easy on developers who produce titles which are, feel so disconnected from our expectations and claim it has accurate physics? No. If a developer releases a title which has an overwhelmingly negative reception in terms of driving experience, then they're clearly missing the point of their product. Maybe they need to take a step back, take their head out of the data, and check to see if they've lost the fundamentals of driving dynamics by consulting real-world professionals and getting their subjective opinions. I'm a big fan of what some of the titles have done, taking on board the likes of James Baldwin with the McLaren and then Daniel Morad with the Mercedes GT3 car. They've taken them on board in a professional role to give feedback on those cars. If the budget doesn't really stretch to that kind of granularity, then they should absolutely have somebody full-time experienced in driving dynamics, not vehicle dynamics, but driving dynamics from a subjective point of view, to keep them on the right track and not lose their way as we often, or so often see in the sim racing world. That is pretty much all I have to say. I realize there's lots of things I haven't commented on, but do you really want to listen to me for another 5-10 minutes? Absolutely not. Thanks.